Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Now, before the break, I asked you, how will the immigration emergency affect your vote? And we heard from Rory, who said that would make him vote for Labour more than the Conservatives or Reform. What are the rest of you saying? Peter says, after voting Tory all my life, never again because of the failed migration policy. Denise says, I've always voted Conservative, but feel they are not Conservative anymore and will be voting Reform. Terry says, scrap the Rwanda fiasco and spend the money on putting the Royal Navy in the Channel and turning them back. And Paul adds, in the context of where I place my vote, migration will play a significant part. Currently, neither Sunak or Starmer will be getting my vote. So that seems to suggest that a lot of you are more concerned about immigration than necessarily you are about the economy. Before the break, you heard me speaking to Nigel. I got his reaction on the controversy caused by his speech on immigration this morning, including a row with the BBC, ending with the corporation apologising. And this is what he said.
I said before, having met face to face, these young men in the English Channel, how aggressive many of them are. But I didn't say it today. I quoted an EU lovey, the former boss of the European Council, Donald Tusk. But clearly, if it comes from me, context gets lost entirely.
To get the reaction to that, I'm joined by Peter Edwards, former editor of Labour List, and Sunil Sharma, Chief Operating Officer of the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth. Lovely to see you this evening, gents. Let's start with you first of all, Peter. Are Labour convincing on immigration? We just heard from a lot of viewers and listeners who are saying that they don't think they are and that they'd rather vote for Reform than Labour or even the Tories.
Immigration is a really important issue, especially at election time. The last poll I saw, which I think was Ipsos Mori, around the start of this calendar year, Labour had a narrow lead on immigration and asylum issues. So, they won't be complacent. I'm sure you're fed up of hearing that phrase about no complacency. Immigration is important election time, but I think the public have generally lost faith in the government because of broken promises.
Sunil, what do you think of what Nigel Farage has said this morning? I mean, some people, including the BBC, have found it inflammatory and had to apologise for it. Is he going too far or does he have a point?
No, I think he definitely has a point. I think we've got to a stage now where we're so scared of offending a small minority that we're prepared to hurt the majority. And what Nigel said this morning, I think the vast majority of this country would agree with. I think naturally people more London-focused, London-based mainstream media will maybe see offence to it, but all of his statistics used are factual. We know that majority of men are the ones that come in via the English Channel, via the votes. We know this for a fact. We know that they find it harder to adapt into society when you have large volumes. You can look across at Sweden, Scandinavian countries who are going a lot stricter with their immigration now. So everything he said is pretty much a fact and can be backed up by other countries in very similar situations. So I think what he's said is completely right, and we should, I think his basic common sense is what he used today.
Peter, Keir Starmer's success on July the 4th is going to depend on him persuading the disgruntled, persuading the undecideds. If they're worried about immigration, is he the right person to sell the message that Labour will bring immigration down, both legal and illegal, when everyone knows that when he worked as a lawyer, he was somebody that fought for more immigration, not less?
Well, I don't think it's true to say fought for more immigration, but you'll be aware that a barrister adopts a cab rank principle in terms of how they're taking their clients. But look, I want to go back to this point about Nigel Farage, because I don't think Nigel Farage speaks factually. I think he spreads division, and I think he does so deliberately because he's an extremely canny politician. So to take one example, he talked about Britain moving towards a sectarian politics where women are excluded. In the borough I've spent most time, Tower Hamlets in East London, the Labour group has a majority of women. So I really think it's in Nigel Farage's tactical interests, but not in Britain's interests, to spread dangerous myths about immigration, because it turns people towards smaller parties. Nigel Farage's approach is a plague on all your houses, but he doesn't have the data to back that up.
Although he makes a good point, doesn't he, about some of the Green and independent councillors that we witnessed at the local elections, sort of seemingly making their own campaigns much more about freeing Palestine than actual local constituency matters. I mean, the Green candidate who was shouting Allah Akbar in the street, I wouldn't imagine has been chosen by the Greens because of his sort of eco-warriorness or any of his other Green policies.
Well, you shouldn't be shouting that, and you'll have to ask the Green Party about the Greens. I'm a Labour supporter through thick and thin. But of course, what's happening in the Middle East is a massive source of distress to all of us. A horrific anti-Semitic attack on October the 7th, and then an unbelievable loss of life in Palestine, over 30,000 now. It's inevitable that when we're witnessing such distressing scenes, that's going to touch upon British politics. Indeed, it'd be strange if British politicians or candidates were not talking about that, whatever their view.
Sunil, do you think that the Tories have given up on the Muslim vote and that actually that's a big disadvantage to them? Because if you think about most Muslim communities, they've got small c conservative values. They're probably socially conservative. They're obviously religious. They're family orientated. They're aspirational. In many respects, they've been lost to Labour. It's almost a given that Muslim people should vote for Labour, even though there's a lot for the Conservative Party, one assumes, to offer them.
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult one. I definitely agree with the entrepreneurial nature of the Muslim communities, that they are socially more conservative. But there are some harsh facts that, again, these are statistics, what Nigel Farage is saying and parts of the Conservative Party are saying, which is that there is an issue in terms of adaptability, in terms of how much they are adapting. Now, plenty of the Muslim communities are, and we can see differences depending on even which parts of the world that they come from. But I'll give you a statistic about when Nigel Farage had his sort of, when he was talking about men in terms of the focus with Islamic men, 70% of Muslim women are unemployed versus 20% of Christian women. 55% of all British Pakistanis are married to blood relatives, so ever a second cousin. 37% of babies born between 2007 and 11, the British Pakistani parents are first cousins. We know statistically, scientifically, if it's a cousin marriage, you have double the chance of a birthing defect. This poor child has a much significant difficulty of life. 90% of 43,000 extremists on the MI5 watch list are Islamically related. We know about what happened in Rotherham in terms of with those women that were raped and abused and sold by largely Pakistani men. These are serious problems going on in our country, and I don't think when Nigel talks about it, or other Conservative MPs, or even some Labour MPs who talk about it, that they should be tarnished with this Islamophobia flag, which is what has happened to Nigel Farage this morning, which I think is deeply unfair. We need to ask the questions of how do we bring these people more into our society.
Peter, very quick response to that, please.
I'm really concerned about generalisations of the like I've just heard. I'm a Christian. We've got different views about sex before marriage and sexuality. There's different views within Islam about sex before marriage and sexuality. Let's not mix these up. Yeah, it's not the right approach. Generalisations are never helpful when talking about different ethnic or religious groups.
Peter Edwards and Sunil Sharma, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening.